The changing of the guard at the top of the Greens has created a flurry of speculation on what this means for politics, the bush and business. New leader Christine Milne is embarking on a listening tour in the bush, where she believes the Greens have a lot in common with many farmers. Take foreign buyouts of agricultural land and coal seam gas for starters. Well, a company that owns an awful lot of the bush, about 1% of Australia actually, is AACO, the Australian agricultural company. And joining me now from Brisbane for his perspective is Chief Executive David Farley. David, welcome to the programme.
Good evening, Tikki.
Well, as I say, you fellows own about 1% of Australia, I think. What do you make of this overture to the bush by Christine Milne?
Well, Christine's demonstrated that she's on a listening brief at the moment. She comes with a providence of understanding her beginnings in agriculture with dairy. So, she's a mother. She's a well-skilled politician. And more importantly, I suppose the bush and the values that we both share is we're about the preservation, conservation of our land assets, the sustainability of our animals, of our industry and the welfare of our animals. So, you know, on the top pitch of it all, we've got a lot of a common platform.
Why do you think she might appeal more to the bush as an individual than Bob Brown?
Well, I suppose, well, first of all, Christine can relate to it. She comes from that background. She is a mother, as I said earlier, of two boys. She can relate to the tyranny of distance, raising families and that. But I do think the most important thing is ultimately getting an alignment. And what will be required from the bush is a greater understanding and a greater articulation from Christine and the team on her policies and how those policies can be played out. There's one thing the bush has got. It does have a lot of time. They are deep thinkers and they're well read. And they will comfortably read all those policies that are on the Green website and ask how, why and when.
Well, indeed, and the policies of the Green as opposed to what Christine Milne is articulating at the moment is a case in point. But I get the feeling you don't think she's as extreme as Bob Brown. And why I ask about that is because there have been plenty of media reports and speculation over the weekend about precisely the opposite, that she might move the Greens to the left and indeed be less pragmatic than Bob Brown.
Well, I suppose if you're trying to win the bush, you've got to win votes. Therefore, people will vote on their livelihood, their ambitions to live in the bush, their values in the bush, and more importantly, the succession of their families in the bush. And I think if there was a move too far away from where the current standing is, without adjusting the current standing, is the bush will not be won by the Greens.
Now, one of the policies that she has talked about, which I know is very close to your business, of course, is the banning of live cattle exports. And there she's talking about value-adding as an alternative in Australia. I mean, with clearly no appreciation of wet markets that you're exporting into. I mean, to what extent, it's obviously not likely to win her much support amongst graziers. What has she got to listen to on that subject from you?
Well, I think that the first thing is to really understand the dynamics of the marketplace and then be willing to work with, especially our major client Indonesia, in building and improving their food supply chain strategies. You know, we dealt, as a country, we dealt Indonesia a powerful blow last year. We put food inflation into their food chain and put ourselves now in an awkward negotiating position with Indonesia. We do not want Indonesia in any way retaliating with trade embargo or any other products that could come across our desk that could bring Australia to a halt quickly. Both Australian and Indonesian, both across the board, no one supported what was shown on the Four Corners program, and everyone has worked very, very hard, very quickly to right that situation. And that productivity and that improvement's still carrying on today.
But you're a man that often thinks out of the box, I know, David, and I'm sure there'll be other suggestions put up by the Greens. For example, that Australians should be investing in refrigeration in areas like Indonesia. Is that a possibility, or is the population just too disparate?
Look, we've got a population of in excess of now 250 million. There is a rising GDP, but you've really got to go there and understand the infrastructure, the logistics that are involved. And you know, we can work, invest and participate with the improvement of the food chain over there, but it is not an overnight solution.
All right. Christine Milne is also clearly concerned about coal seam gas and foreign ownership of agricultural land. Now, I know that I've spoken to you about this before, and you're not that concerned about either of those issues. Do you think, however, that she will get a lot of support from others in rural Australia on these issues?
I think that the first thing is to put the facts out there, and the reality is Australia needs offshore capital to grow its agricultural base, and if we're going to be supplying the international demand markets of food. So we haven't got a capital base or a financial system that allows the type of development that's required. I don't think it's such an issue of being fearful, and before we even get to that stage, it's a matter of developing the right policies around the land ownership and how even simple things of taxation of product, how making sure that we can capture the right amount of revenue back into our social systems. And there's a lot of work to be done before we become too blasé, too blatant and put a stop to an important flow of capital that's required.
Last week, as Deputy Leader, Christine Milne was talking about the diesel fuel rebate, walking like a subsidy and quacking like a subsidy. And the Greens, I know, are looking to pressure the government to remove that rebate from the resources sector. If that was suggested as far as the farming sector was concerned, presumably that would be a very serious issue.
Look, it is a serious issue in the north. You know, we're about to have our main service suppliers be encumbered with a carbon tax that they haven't got an ability to push that tax up the system. You know, when we've got product going into foreign countries that won't recognise it. So to take away the rebates on the diesel energy that powers our pumping stations, our homesteads and the utilities and that around the stations would force a quick implosion in rural Australia, and I'm sure Christine doesn't want that.
It'll be very interesting. We might get her on after her listening tour. Thank you very much, David, for joining us. David Farley.
Thanks, Ticky.